Subscribe to my YouTube channel for more heart-touching stories like this. Now let me take you into a story that will make your heart ache and then cheer. It started in a quiet neighborhood. Big mansions lined up like they were competing with each other, tall hedges, shiny black gates, and expensive cars parked like trophies. But in the corner of that glittering street stood a small worn-down house. The paint was chipped, the mailbox was rusty, and the garden had long given up blooming. That's where Grandma Lee lived. To the neighbors, she was just that old poor woman, someone they thought didn't belong in their upscale world. The rumors flew fast. She probably inherited the house and can't even afford to keep it up. Maybe her kids abandoned her. They whispered, smirked, and laughed behind her back. Sometimes they didn't even bother to whisper. They mocked her openly at community meetings, excluded her from events, and complained about her messy front yard. But Grandma Lee never said a word. She just smiled gently, swept her little porch every morning, and offered cookies to the delivery boys and gardeners who passed by. She didn't have much, but she had her dignity. Still, that didn't stop the neighbors from going too far, especially Mrs. Tang, who lived next door. Mrs. Tang was known for her flashy lifestyle, designer bags, weekly spa visits, and loud phone calls in her garden, where she talked about stock markets like she owned half of the city. She took special pleasure in belittling Grandma Lee. One time, when Grandma Lee offered her some homemade dumplings during Lunar New Year, Mrs. Tang took one look and said with a laugh, "Oh dear, are these safe to eat? I don't want to get food poisoning." The other women standing with her laughed too, not even hiding their disgust. Another neighbor, Mr. He, made sure the community association sent Grandma Lee a notice about her unmaintained property every month. Her small vegetable patch? Unsightly. Her wooden bench by the tree? Too old. One time, someone even called the city to report her home for health violations. But Grandma Lee said nothing. What they didn't know, what none of them even bothered to ask, was that Grandma Lee had a daughter who hadn't visited in years. Yes, but not because she didn't care. No, her daughter was away building something big, something powerful. Lin Yue was her name. People in the city called her the Iron CEO. At just 35, she ran one of the top tech companies in the country. Billion-dollar deals, international awards, private jets. Lin Yue had it all. But fame and success came with a price. For years, she'd stayed away from her mother's quiet life to protect her from the chaos that came with being in the spotlight. She thought distance was safety, but she was wrong. One evening, Lin Yue's assistant handed her a small envelope. "This came in the mail today. Looks personal." Inside was a photo of her mother, sweeping her porch with trash dumped all around by the neighbors. On the back, someone had scribbled, "You think you're too good for us? Clean this up, Lin." Yu's hands trembled. She hadn't spoken to her mother in months. Her work kept her on the move, but now, guilt twisted in her chest. She booked the first flight out that night, with no PR team, no press, no headlines. Just one thought in her mind. They bullied the wrong woman. The next morning, the neighborhood was buzzing. A sleek black car pulled up in front of Grandma Lee's house. People peered through their curtains. Some came outside, pretending to water plants or walk their dogs. The car door opened, and out stepped a woman in a tailored suit, sunglasses, and heels, sharp enough to slice glass. Lin Yue, Mrs. Tang nearly choked on her green smoothie. "Is that her daughter?" she whispered to Mr. He, who was already trying to search Lin Yue's face on his phone. Before they could say another word, Lin Yue had already walked up the old porch and wrapped her arms around her mother. Grandma Lee looked shocked. Yue, what are you doing here? I should have come sooner, Lin Yue said quietly. I didn't know it had gotten this bad. By now, a small crowd had gathered across the street. Whispers grew louder. Wait, isn't that the CEO of LY Tech? No way, she's worth billions. That's her mother, but Lin Yue didn't even look at them. She stepped back, took off her sunglasses, and scanned the houses around her with a cold, piercing gaze. Ma, she said, her voice calm but firm. Pack your things. You're moving out of here. No, child, Grandma Lee said gently. This is my home. Lin Yue stared at her for a moment. Then she nodded. Then I'll make sure this place changes. Starting now. She turned to the crowd. You all enjoyed mocking her, laughing at her, calling her names because you thought she was alone. But you were wrong. She's not alone. And this street, it's never going to be the same. No one spoke. Not a word. Even Mrs. Tang suddenly remembered she had a hair appointment and disappeared into her house. But that was just the beginning. Lin Yue didn't come for a visit. She came for revenge. And not the kind you see in dramas or read in books. This was quiet, elegant, and ruthless. The kind that makes people realize their biggest mistake wasn't being cruel. It was being cruel to someone who had powerful love on her side. You won't believe what happened next. But let's just say, by the end of the week, those rich neighbors, they were begging for forgiveness. To find out how Lin Yue turned the entire neighborhood upside down and gave her mother the respect she always deserved, stay tuned for part 2. The real story is just getting started. Lin Yue didn't come with cameras. She didn't need to make a scene. Her presence alone changed everything. By the next morning, her company's sleek black vans quietly rolled into the neighborhood. Workers that stepped out, architects, landscape designers, security consultants. Not one neighbor knew what was happening, but they all peeked nervously through blinds, whispering and guessing. Some thought Lin Yue was selling the house. Others believed she was building a new villa for her mother, but no one expected what was really going on. Lin Yue had a plan, a personal one, and it started by transforming her mother's house, not into a mansion, but into a peaceful, dignified sanctuary. She had new fences built, a beautiful garden planted, and a security system installed that watched everything, including the neighbors who used to throw trash in Grandma Lee's yard. Every day, construction trucks and luxury service teams came and went while Mrs. Tang and Mr. He watched silently from their windows, their confidence slowly crumbling. Grandma Lee, at first, was overwhelmed. "You're spending too much money," she whispered one evening, watching a team of chefs install a custom kitchen. Lin Yue smiled gently and took her hand. "Not a single cent I've earned means anything if I can't give it to you." But while Grandma Lee's home was becoming something beautiful, the neighborhood itself started to feel uneasy. No one laughed anymore when they passed her house. In fact, most of them crossed the street to avoid it. Not because they were scared of Lin Yue's money, but because deep down, they knew they had been wrong. And now, the power had shifted. Still, Lin Yue didn't forget. She didn't forget the stares, the insults, the way they humiliated her mother in public. So, she invited the entire neighborhood for tea one Saturday afternoon, not out of kindness, but to make them look her in the eye. Mrs. Tang came dressed in her best silk blouse, pretending to be cheerful. "Lin Yue, such a surprise seeing you here again. We've all missed your mother so much." Lin Yue didn't smile. "Really? Because you told me you once accused her of stealing your garden hose." Mrs. Tang's smile twitched. "Oh, well, I must have been mistaken." mister. He shuffled forward awkwardly. We didn't mean anything by it. You know how neighborhood gossip goes. Lin Yue tilted her head. Gossip? You mean like calling her a beggar behind her back? Or like that time someone dumped a bag of spoiled vegetables at her door? Her voice was calm, but every word cut like glass. Silence fell over the garden. No one dared to speak. That's when Grandma Li gently placed her hand on Lin Yue's arm. Let it go, child, she whispered. Revenge won't change their hearts. But Lin Yue's revenge wasn't just about shaming them. It was about waking them up, and it worked. Within a week, the community that once looked down on Grandma Li started cleaning up their own houses. Mrs. Tang hired a gardener. He returned the old books he'd borrowed from Grandma Li years ago and never gave back. Some even dropped apology notes in her mailbox, hoping she'd forgive and forget. But one person didn't change. Mr. Zhao, the richest man on the block. A real estate developer, always dressed in sharp suits and smelling like expensive cologne. He had once offered to buy Grandma Li's house for a fraction of its worth, telling her, "This street needs people who fit in." When she refused, he turned hostile, called inspectors, complained about noise, spread rumors that she was hoarding junk inside. Now seeing Lin Yue around, he started acting friendly, invited her to his office, offered business partnerships. But Lin Yue could see straight through him. He didn't want peace. He wanted control. And one evening, it became clear. Lin Yue came home to find the garden destroyed, flowers trampled, sprinklers broken, soil ripped out. On the wall, someone had spray painted a message, "Take your money and leave." It was too clean, too targeted to be random vandalism. Grandma Li gasped when she saw it. Why would they do this? But Lin Yue already knew. She stared at the damage, her face unreadable. Then she whispered, "They still think you're weak." The next day, she made a phone call. 3 days later, a luxury van parked across from Mr. Zhao's house. Out stepped a team from the national media. Journalists, reporters, drones flying above. The headlines hit the internet within hours. Tech. CEO Lin Yue faces community harassment. Mother bullied by wealthy residents. The story spread like wildfire. Comments flooded in. How heartless can people be? Just because someone looks poor doesn't mean they're alone. Respect your elders, no matter their background. The pressure was immediate. Mr. Zhao's partners began pulling out of his projects. His name started trending online, not for his business, but for bullying a kind old woman who never hurt anyone. But that wasn't the end. Lin Yue didn't stop there. She announced that her company would invest in rebuilding the entire neighborhood. But with a twist, she would fund community projects, education programs, and a cultural center for elders, but only if the homeowners voted. To create an official neighborhood charter, one that protected every resident, no matter their income. And the first condition, an official apology to her mother, in writing, publicly posted. The neighbors panicked. Mr. Zhao fought back, called it blackmail, but his voice was drowned out by everyone else, because the truth was, they were ashamed, and ashamed people want forgiveness more than they want revenge. As they gathered to vote, the tension hit its peak. Would they swallow their pride? Would they let go of their old biases? Or would they cling to the same cruelty that had caused this in the first place? The answer came with a letter, handwritten, signed by every household except one. 2. Grandma Li, we were wrong. You deserved better. We hope you can forgive us. But Lin Yue, she wasn't done yet, because one person still hadn't paid the price. and as she folded the letter, she looked up at Mr. Zhao's mansion across the street. Eyes sharp, voice quiet. "Now," she said, "it's his turn." And that was the calm before the real storm. Mr. Zhao thought the worst had passed. He believed the apology letter was enough to close the chapter, and that Lin Yue would eventually get bored and move on. But he didn't know her well. Lin Yue wasn't someone who walked away quietly, especially not when her mother had suffered for years because of a man who thought his money made him untouchable. A week after the public apology, something unexpected happened. The zoning board arrived at Mr. Zhao's house. Not one car, 3. They handed over a notice, pending investigation, into unauthorized renovations, labor violations, and a possible tax issue connected to one of his projects nearby. It didn't take long before rumors started flying. Contractors started pulling out. Buyers withdrew offers. His so-called empire began cracking under the weight of secrets he'd kept buried for years. But Lin Yue didn't dig them up herself. She didn't have to. Turns out, some of Mr. Zhao's own employees had reached out to her after the story went viral. They'd been wronged, underpaid, ignored. And now, with the world finally watching, they had someone powerful enough to listen. Still, Lin Yue didn't gloat. She didn't blast it on the news or hold a press conference. She quietly handed over the evidence to the right people and stepped back. Mr. Zhao, cornered by scandal and lawsuits, tried to save face. He went on TV and called it all a misunderstanding, said he respected all his neighbors, and claimed he was a victim of cancel culture. But his words didn't land. The internet doesn't forget, and neither does a community that finally realized how deep the damage had been. As his fortune fell, the people he once controlled stopped listening to him. One by one, neighbors who used to follow his lead stopped answering his calls. His influence, gone. His house, for sale. And him, a shadow of the man who once mocked a gentle old lady, just trying to live peacefully. As for Grandma Li, she never once said, "I told you so." She continued tending to her garden, waving at neighbors, offering tea to anyone who visited. Even Mrs. Tang, who now came over every weekend, bringing fresh fruit and homemade dumplings, not out of guilt anymore, but from a genuine place of friendship. The neighborhood changed. It wasn't just about new paint or freshly planted flowers. People started checking in on one another. Kids played freely again. The tension that once hung over the street disappeared, replaced by something softer, something kinder. Lin Yue didn't stay long. After finishing the renovation, she told her, "Mother, it's time I get back to work, but I'll visit every weekend. And this time, you won't be alone." Grandma Li smiled, hugged her daughter tight, and whispered, "You gave me more than a home. You gave me back my voice." The story of the billionaire daughter defending her mother became a symbol, not just about money or revenge, but about standing up when no one else does, about not letting silence be the answer to cruelty, and about remembering that kindness doesn't mean weakness. Sometimes it's the greatest strength of all. In the end, Lin Yue didn't just change one street. She reminded everyone watching, on social media, in news articles, in whispers shared between neighbors, that you never really know who someone is until you push them too far. Because sometimes, the quiet woman walking alone with grocery bags is the mother of someone powerful enough to shake the ground beneath your feet. And sometimes, justice doesn't come loudly. It comes with steady footsteps, sharp eyes, and a heart full of love that refuses to forget.